The crowd stood there in surprise. It was the closest battle that they have seen. Lieutenant Governor. Surge was pushed to the point to his max, and Ash was pushed himself also. Strategy after strategy, punches after punches, moves after moves, both trainers fought it with everything they had. And yet, Ash won by a fraction of that second. What happened next was something that surprised everyone. Lieutenant Surge clutched his chest and was laying on the ground. "Dad!" shouted his daughter and made a run for it. Ash ran also and began to communicate the ambulance. He took off his jacket and hoped that it was warm enough. He was nervous over the condition of the large man, and was doing anything to help him. He noticed his Raichu barely getting up and was rubbing her body to create heat, saying, "Rai." Paramedics came and took him to the hospital as both Ash and Lieutenant Surge's daughter were waiting on the waiting room. Raichu looked depressed. She wanted to make sure her master was well. She knew of what monsters he faced when he closes his eyes and what he faces each night. She wanted to make sure he would live to fight another day. She was being comforted by Ash's Pikachu, giving comforting words. Ash felt tired himself. For him, the battle was more of a mental battle. He never faced another trainer with similar unorthodox style. Then again, this is a soldier who improvises and creates moves over time. He looked at Lieutenant Surge's daughter and noticed how worried she is. She is nibbling her lips, while looking at the door, hoping for any news. An hour later, a middle-aged doctor came into the waiting room. He was approached by the trainer and the daughter of his patient. He did pull through. He suffered a mild heart attack. They both gasped. From what I could find, he was an alcoholic, I presume. She nodded. The doctor sighed and said, whenever a person is getting off of any substance or drugs, they go through a withdrawal. The body tends to adapt over time of its needs for the dependencies. If he was giving it up, he should have came to me to consult his problems. This could have helped him with dealing with his withdrawals. Unfortunately, his body began to act violently and fail over time. I saw how the battle actually increased a chance of suffering a heart attack or anything fatal. She stepped forward. Is there a way for him that he would battle again? He nodded. He could, if he could clean out his system. Once that is finished, then he could go through group sessions to any other means to keep him away from drinking again. It is a long road, but yes, he could battle again. She let out a breath of relief. She looked down at Raichu with a smile and said, "Dad is going to be fine." Raichu jumped for joy and bolted herself out of the waiting room, looking for her friend. She went from room to room, looking for his scent. When she found his scent, she followed it. The mouse Pokémon moved room to room, until he was laying there awakened from his recovery. "Rai!" A whisper escaped from Raichu. "Hello, old friend," a horse of a voice from Surge replied. Raichu carefully went into the bed and licked her master's face and cuddled him. He smiled and at his Raichu's affection and stroked her. He felt better, but knew he screwed up in his part. He was stubborn over receiving help. He wasn't the type of man who will look for help. He tended to do things on his own. He winces over the idea of how his daughter will react. And true to his thoughts, his daughter and his opponent came in the room. She was in near tears and said, "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" He took a bit of breath and replied, "Wanted to face this by myself. Never wanted you to do it." She went over and held his hand. "Dad, you don't have to face this alone. I want to be by your side, to help you." She answered, "Please Dad, let me help you." He looked at his daughter and nodded, "Very well, I will tell you why I drink. Just don't judge me. I want Dad, I promise." Suddenly he looked at his opponent that he lost. He couldn't believe how he went all out against the young trainer. He then asked his daughter, "Did you brought the items?" She nodded. He then stood a bit and took off his oxygen mask. Then he said, "As the victor of this battle, here I present you the Thunder Badge." He was handed a small lightning bolt badge. He placed it along with his other badges. "This shows proof of quickness and innovation for your fighting prowess. Although I would present to you the Thunderbolt move, but I know that your Pikachu will learn it on his own." He pointed out, "However, I am here to present you a move that is learned in Hoenn. This is called Shock Wave." He gave the technical CD and Ash stared at it. I was going to use it for Raichu, but you needed to more than I do. Teach it to him, and I guarantee you that you can manipulate the attack at any direction." He nodded and said, "Thanks, Lieutenant Surge, for the battle and everything." Surge gave a salute as Ash returned it back. Pokémon Center. "Yeah Dad, I won the match," said Ash. Both Ash's parents were on the phone. "I saw the fight, and I never seen Lieutenant Surge this serious before. You just pushed him to his own limits, son." "Yeah, right now he is recovering from a small heart attack." Then his mother said, "I'm glad that you're okay though. Keep contacting us if you need anything." "I will Mom, better call Professor Oak for a switch." They hung up as Ash was called to pick up his Pokémon. He retrieved it and called Professor Oak. He waited for a moment, when Professor Oak was on screen. Professor Oak's lab. "Hey there Professor, this is Ash." Oak was a bit surprised of the call. "Oh hello Ash. Good to hear from you. Congratulations on your fight again Lieutenant Surge." People are in shock how close the fight was. "Yeah, I thought I lost the fight, but glad that I outlasted him." He nodded and then said, "True. So what can I do for you?" "I need to make a trade for Sandslash, Mankey, and Clefairy to bring in Psyduck, Spearow, and Eevee." "Alright then, place the Pokémon on the transferring machine." He did so and waited for a moment. He then received his Pokémon. "Anything else you need?" He shook his head. "Nope, I'm good." "Very well then, if you need anything else call up." "I will, take care of yourself Professor." He hung up and Ash took out his Eevee. She looked around and saw her trainer. She yipped and began licking his face. Ash chuckled on her antics. He began to pet her and enjoyed the affection. She then saw Pikachu and curled up to him. Pikachu raised his eyebrow and shrugged. "Well guys, the sun is setting, how about some dinner and then some sleep?" They both nodded as he went to eat at a diner that catered for both Pokémon and humans. As his Pokémon ate, he was eating a large plate of beef and chicken noodles. He was enjoying the meal as some of the customers were waving at him with some thumbs up. He waved back to acknowledge them. As he ate, both Pikachu and Eevee were eating from the same dish. Then they realized that the last ball of chow was there. Pikachu then handed it to the fox Pokémon with a kind gesture. She was in surprise of give it up just like that. She then went over to Pikachu and licked his lips then ate the last one. The mouse Pokémon flushed with what just happened. As time passed by, he stayed at an improved hotel and as both Eevee and Pikachu were curled up together in a soft sofa, Ash was in thoughts over what is going on with his life. This world is different. He pondered over if Lieutenant Surge wasn't saved in time, would he felt accountable for his actions? Would he felt guilty of his fault for getting Surge excited over the fight? He sighed and shook his head. No he wouldn't. He made the choice to fight. Then again, having new Pokémon on his belt felt different than his world. He pondered of finding all 3 starters, but he knew that those odds are even shorter than what he had found. He is grateful with the Eevee and shiny Psyduck he received. With the right training they will be difficult to take down. Then he yawned and took off his shoes. He changed into his pajamas and went to sleep. In the dream world, Ash was walking on a plain grass, as the sun was shining brightly in the blue sky. He then noticed a bench with a figure sitting down, a little hunched over. He went over to find out who it was. As he finally approached to the individual in question, he was surprised who it was. Sitting there was a young man with dark brown hair, an orange bandana, green shirt and khaki shorts. He was drawing something and was merely focuses by his work. Tracy. The young man stopped drawing for a moment and looked at his guest. He smiled and said, "So you do remember me, huh?" He was surprised by his happy tone. "Yeah, I always remember my friends." He placed his drawing to the side and then Tracy continued, "Do you really remember them, or do you discard them after a while?" Ash was once more surprised by his bluntness. He answered carefully, "To be honest, my subconscious does so. I can't control over the world that existed, Tracy." "That is a good answer." Then stretched for a moment and gestured him to sit on the bench. Then the young artist continued, "Ever wonder why I existed, Ash?" He pondered for a moment and shrugged. Tracy shook his head and replied, well, unlike Brock, I pretty much was a replacement for him. I was your artistic side of you. You loved to draw Pokémon. Rarely you would deal with human interaction. Like Gary, you wanted to see if I can settle down for a moment as an apprentice of some sort. He nodded. Funny really. I wasn't pervasive, yet I was subtle of being the peacemaker. I did a pretty good job on that between Misty and yourself. Of course, you needed me more around as your feeling for women were still new to you. So in order to block things out, you subconsciously created me to be your mediator. Ash was surprised by this, and he was indeed correct. He felt back then not sure of girls, so bringing Tracy to allow Brock to have a break did put him into a quandary over Misty. It did question him about relationships and responsibilities. Just try not to forget about me, Ash. It would be tragic that I am forgotten in your mind and heart. He looked sadly. Ash frowned and hugged his friend. He never meant for Tracy to be forgotten, nor move aside. He cursed his subconscious for allowing a travesty like this to occur. He knew he was trying to grow in such a unique manner, but never like this. Once he parted, Tracy smiled and said, well, this is the part you wake up and face the reality of the world that exists. He nodded sadly and the vision faded away. Motel room. Ash opened his eyes as the sun was rising at the same time. He took out his paper that he was drawing on and made an image of Tracy, while holding his sketch and pencil, waving at Ash. Once he finished, he took out his Pokédex and looked through the map section. He needed a way to go to Celadon City in order for him to receive the next badge. He waited for a bit and noticed both Pikachu and Eevee were still asleep, cuddling each other. He smiled softly of how Pikachu never had some crush with anyone, not that he might not have known. A beeping brought back to his attention and saw the path. He frowned for a moment. He had to take a detour to Rock Tunnel, then past a Lavender Town and then take this underground route that will take him there. He whistled to himself of the trip, but knew that this will bring him one step closer to being the Pokémon master that he desired to be. Ash was riding his new bike he bought toward Route 11. He bought it in Vermilion City with the money he had saved and some few other supplies. Both his Pikachu and Eevee were in the basket, enjoying the ride. He felt alive and great. He enjoyed the little breeze in the afternoon and the ride toward Rock Tunnel was smooth. Thus far, no trainer were present. He hasn't bumped into anyone that is interested in battling him, strangely. The young trainer hoped it wasn't that he had 3 badges with him, nor that he skipped them over the ride of the bike. He knew he had to fight in order for his Pokémon to grow. He kept riding the bicycle, until he saw a small sign that said, Rock Tunnel 1 mile ahead. He was almost there, just a bit more and he could rest from his ride for a moment. An advantage of having bikes would be traveling from place to place. Disadvantage, when walking, it requires to carry it over. Luckily, a new transport system allows it to teleport the bike from one Pokémon Center to another. He hoped to find it and leave it there safely. He reached his destination. He saw a cave with a few trees within its entrance and at least 40 feet away, stood a Pokémon Center. He smiled and was glad to do so. Riding a bike as dangerous as a cave would be quite difficult. He rode a little slow in the cave and stopped. He got off. All right Eevee and Pikachu, said Ash, time to get off. Chew. They both got off and walked by his side. He then entered and saw a female nurse, typing away some information, and noticed the visitor. Welcome to the Pokémon Center, do you need your Pokémon to be healed? Said the young nurse. Ash replied, no, actually I needed to see if you can transfer this bike into the nearest Pokémon Center after reaching the other side of Rock Tunnel. Of course, just place the bike in the pad, then slide your identification or Pokédex, and it will transfer there in Lavender Town. Thanks. He went over a small pad that was the size of a bike, and found a slot that was fit enough for a Pokédex. He slid it and saw his bike teleport. He is amazed with how far technology reached for that. Is there anything else that you need? Oh no, that is all. Thanks though. You're welcome. As he stepped out of the center and was walking in the entrance, he noticed a young school girl, sitting near the entrance of the cave with a depressed look. He went over and said, hey, are you all right? She looked over and noticed who spoke to her. She was surprised to see that it was the new trainer who beat Lieutenant Surge. She was a little nervous. There are some Pokegeeks who beat my Pokémon to a pulp, she hesitantly said. Ash raised an eyebrow. Pokegeeks? Yeah, they are experts at Pokémon and they basically bully anyone in a fight. They are strange when they sometimes dress up as Pokémon. She replied, I fought with one of them in that cave and well, he was aggressive. She was finding it hard to continue. What? He wanted me to not move, just to feel me up. Near in tears from what she was saying, he never wanted my credits. Oh Mew, she covered her face and was crying. He was in disbelief. Why would trainers do that though? It never added it up at all. Then again, his father did warn him that there are people out there who will take advantage to other trainers. Some women were more vulnerable in their Pokémon trainer. That is why hand-to-hand combat training is necessary to protect themselves. He went over to the girl, and he went over and hugged her for comfort. His mother said once, if a young woman is distressed, comfort them at best with a hug. They will feel better. The girl felt being held by the young trainer, relaxed and cried more freely. After a moment, they parted for a moment and she said with appreciated smile, thanks, just be careful. Don't worry, he won't know what hit him. He made this as a statement. She nodded and then said, good luck, I'm heading to the Pokémon Center to figure out what to do next. Alright, take care. He then felt a kiss in the cheek and she walked off. He flushed as Pikachu snickered about the swore in Mew that his friend will end up with more mates than anyone. Eevee on the other hand thought it was sweet of him. Ash then said, let's go guys. They walked in the cave and after 40 yards, the light itself became nearly impossible to see. He then took something out of his backpack and took out a round spherical item. Gary told him to smash in the ground and it will create light that is similar to flash. He smashed it at the ground and a bright flash went all over the cave and he was able to see everything in the cave from the stalagmites to some Pokémon roaming around. He then signaled to move forward. He walked along the way and noticed some markers that it said, the way out. He shook his head and followed it. He kept moving until a rock climber was taking drink in his canteen and then looked around when he noticed him. Hey kid, how about a little battle? Said the climber. Ash smiled, sure. This will be 2-on-2, ready. He nodded as the climber got ready. Ash was also. Let's go Graveler. A large rock Pokémon, with 4 arms was ready to fight. Let's go Psyduck. His shiny Psyduck came out of the Pokeball and had this strange look at him. The climber smirked and knew he was finished. Graveler, rock throw. He was picking up a large rock and ready to toss it. Psyduck, use water pulse. Psyduck concentrated and released a strong ring of water from his mouth. The attack was a direct hit and Graveler was launched into a wall, taking him out of the fight. The climber knew it was a stupid move in his part of sending Graveler, but he could still be taken out. Graveler, return. He returned his Pokémon and took out another Pokeball. Go Machoke. A larger, muscular Pokémon, was ready to fight. Machoke, go for a Mega Punch. Psyduck, Zen Headbutt. Both attacks collided. Since Psyduck barely felt the hit, Machoke was sent flying into a stalagmite, knocking him out. The climber sighed, knowing he had a loss from a Psyduck. Ash on the other hand was surprised how powerful Psyduck was. Great job kid, you beat me. Thanks, although it was a bit of a one-sided battle. The larger man gave a hearty laugh, yeah, but serves me right though. Well take care, kid. He waved as the climber left. Ash continued on his walk, hoping to leave. The walk was a bit of a frustration. As he kept walking, he avoided any Onyxes and Geodudes in the way. Psyduck is summoned every once in a while, as Pikachu also provided some cover. He felt he was close reaching the end of it all. He just needed to continue on with his path. He reached to a ladder and climbed up. As he continued on, he then heard a scream from a girl. He ran toward the direction of the scream. Please, stop. You won the fight, you have your credits. A girl, with blue hair and green eyes with a schoolgirl clothing, was trying to stay away from an older man with thick glasses and a business clothing. You know, money I have, but you have something more that will satisfy me. He lunged at her and grabbed her wrists. He pinned her down as she kept screaming. Hey, let her go. He loosened the grip and turned around. He saw a trainer standing there with a hard look in his eyes. The older man smirked as the girl managed to scurry away from him. Oh, another brainless trainer to deal with, said the man. You were interfering with my reward. You monster, I am going to make sure you don't escape. Ash said angrily. Humph, he stood up and took out his Pokeball. You will learn your place as a trainer that, IA Pokegeek, are the far more dominating in battle than a gym leader and the so-called Elite Four. And you will see why. Let's go Weepinbell. A large plant Pokemon waited for orders. Psyduck, I choose you. His shiny Psyduck stood there in a very dumb look. Huh, you're finished, Weepinbell, Razor Leaf. Leaves were heading toward Psyduck, as he stood there ready to take the attack. Psyduck used Ice Beam. He released an icy beam attack, that blew off the Razor Leaf. It managed to hit the plant Pokemon, thus it squealed in pain. The older man was surprised by Psyduck's attack. So it seems that you were hiding something, no matter. Weepinbell, use Solar Beam. The move began to charge and took aim at the duck Pokemon. Psyduck, used Zen Headbutt. Psyduck's head glowed purple and launched himself into his opponent. As the beam released, Psyduck launched himself and managed to hit his opponent. Weepinbell flew and was sent into one of the stalagmites, knocking him out. The trainer growled and returned his Pokemon. You got lucky, but let's see how you handle this one. Go Drowsy. A yellow anteater Pokemon came out of the Pokeball, ready to fight. Return, Psyduck. Psyduck returned to his Pokeball. Go Eevee. Eevee jumped into the Fightatung area, and growled. I will take you out. Drowsy, use Psybeam. Drowsy released a purple beam from his right hand and it was heading toward Eevee. Eevee, dodge with quick attack and go attack. She began to avoid from one attack to another. She was nearing her opponent. Light Screen. Drowsy created a shield to stop any attacks. Ash, however, knew a big flaw about this particular attack. Eevee, launch yourself over him and use Shadow Ball. She jumped high and over the Pokemon and with a wide opening from the vulnerable spot from the Anteater Pokemon, she fired a Dark Ball. It brought an agonizing pain. Another one. She shot another ball, as Drowsy was launched into a wall and knocking out Drowsy of the fight. Oh, you cheating trainer. He returned his Pokemon and launched right at Ash, when he shocked from where he was standing. When the jolt of the attack was finished, the nerdy trainer lost conscious. Return Eevee. Eevee nodded and went to his side. He then took out a Ziploc and placed it into the trainer's wrist. Once it was done, he said, keep an eye on him, Pikachu. Pika. He watched him very closely. Ash then took out his Pokédex and sent a signal for the nearest police to arrest the trainer. Once he was done, he was then glomped by the young girl. Oh my Mew. Thank you for saving me. She exclaimed as tears were coming out of her eyes. She then kissed him on the lips. Then a bit more kisses on his cheek. Poor Ash, his face was as red as a tomato. Then she parted to Ash and was flushing red. Sorry about that. All Ash could say, it's great to be a hero. Outside of Rock Tunnel, 2 hours later. The older trainer was in the back of a police car as then he was taken away. The young girl was talking to 2 officers as Ash sat on a log and felt a little tired. Then one of the officers came up to him and said, great job Ash. We have tried to find out who was responsible for some of sexual assaults and it is surprising that this man was an important man in Sylph Company. Ash was surprised about how the older man was a Sylph Company worker. Even knowing he was what they called a Pokenerd. How many more trainers are like that in existence? A short time later, the officers are gone, and Ash moved on in his journey. Then he saw a sign that said, Welcome to Lavender Town. Ash finally reached toward Lavender Town. His thoughts involved grabbing some supplies and resting. He reached toward the town itself and was surprised how little people are there. He noticed how the people are talking and laughing. It seemed as if it was a small and clean community. He noticed a large building in awe and saw a sign on the side that said, Lavender Tower. His eyes widened by how big it was and maybe visit. He spotted the Pokémon Center and went into the center. In there he gave his Pokéballs to the nurse that was available. As he waited for his Pokémon to be recovered, he went over to call Professor Oak. He went over to the video phone and called. Instead of Professor Oak, it was Gary. Professor Oak's lab, how may I help you? Hey Gary, it's Ash. Hey Ash. Just the person I needed to talk to. Gary smiled. Remember the Jolteon you rescued few days ago? Ash nodded. Well Ash, the Jolteon in question turned out he had some synthetic in his bloodstream. He then frowned. Unfortunately, he is under withdrawal and hoping that he pulls through. Ash too frowned. Withdrawal. One of the side effects when not taking synthetics for a while. Why are you so happy about it a moment ago, though? This is the first time that I can actually see what makes synthetic tick. This will allow me to understand the limits of having a synthetic and any weaknesses. A number of researchers attempted to get their hands on it, but have no success. Now that we have our hands on one, we can go through research on a way to help out Pokémon who have it in their system. Oh, well if that's the case, let me know how close we are in finding a weakness to it. Don't worry, I will let you know. Ash nodded when he heard his name being called. Gary, I have to go. Alright, call back Ash in a few days. Take care now. You too. Bye. They hung up the phone and Ash went to pick up his Pokémon. He noticed both Pikachu and Eevee were conversing over few things. Must be something that they agree on. He then left the center and found a motel to rest up. Outskirt of Lavender Town. Alright, let's go. A group of Team Rockets began to blow a number of trees and boulders off, causing mayhem and panic. The Pokémon were at the run, while the Rockets continued to use their electrical batons to move the directions of Pokémon to cause more chaos in the area. Lavender Town Police Station. A lone officer was typing on his computer, when a call came through. Lavender Police Department, the officer said. This is Officer Nelson, we have an activity near Route 7, we need support here. Copy. He then went to the intercom. Attention all units, we have trouble at Route 7, code green, code green. In Lavender Town. As the officers leave their posts, a black van moved and parked near Lavender Tower. A number of rocket grunts moved into the building, and began to scare the people inside of leaving by waving their electric prods and batons. People evacuated out of the building, but a lone man who was at the top of the floor, went ignoring the signal, praying for the dead. He continued praying, when he felt someone tap his shoulder, a rocket grunt. The rocket grunt had a dark smile. Come on Mr. Fuji, time for us to talk about your old project. The old man's eyes widened and knew he was in trouble. Lavender Town Motel. Ash was having trouble taking a nap, and decided to head to the Lavender Tower. He took his Pokémon with him and looked around. Less people were out and what was strange though is the lack of police force in the area or any security. He raised his eyebrow of the oddness, then just shrugged. He reached toward the entrance of the building. The moment he entered, he realized that it was oddly empty. Hello. Ash shouted, anyone in here? He waited for a moment and nothing. He noticed two people were coming downstairs. The uniforms were enough to realize it was Team Rocket. He hid in the table of the receptionists and hoped he wasn't noticed. He then heard from the two Rocket members. So we have the old man now, so what is the plan? He will spill out on the old experiment he worked on and why he stopped. Will he tell? Who knows? We are also given orders to capture some ghost Pokémon, along with some few Cubones and Marowaks. Now that is a job that I enjoy doing. As they walked on, Ash knew he had to stop them. He waited as they were on their back, and as they walked across more, he knocked one of them with his baton, while the second one held him in a hold. Where are the police? Ash asked angrily. They are distracted in Route 7, said the Rocket member. How many more are in this building? And don't lie to me. Ash pressed his forearms more forward in his neck, making it difficult to breathe. He managed to loosen the hold a little for him to speak. There are 6 of us in total. Then he said, Pikachu, knock him out. Pikachu nodded and did a quick attack and knocked the man out. 4th floor. 4 rocket members began to hunt for any Cubones within the area. They kept looking around from one grave area to another. That is when one of them was spotted. The lone child Cubone was eating a small berry, unknown from the danger that is surrounded. Well, such a youngling that is, one of the rocket members said, as the Cubone was frozen from his spot from fear. You will be a perfect killing machine once we get through your training process, hee. Cubone stood there in fear and trembled from the much larger man that was coming toward him. That is when a piece of a femur bone was twirling right at his direction. He barely dodged the attack by ducking and rolling backwards. He stood off as a Pokémon that was at least half of the rocket's height stood there, anger in the eyes. Marowak, the rocket member, with a sinister smile, said, "So, the mother of this youngling. Well, I suppose teaching you about who are you superiors are in order." He then took out his cattle prod and turned the intensity level to medium. He then went for a vertical attack, but Marowak managed to block the attack. Marowak, she said to her child. He shook his head, see you, Cubone. Marowak. Then she used her strength to push him back and went for a bone club attack. The rocket member blocked the attack, and kicked her hard on the stomach, then slashed with his weapon, managing to hit her. She did felt the electrical attack, but it wasn't enough to cause her to collapse. It just angered her. She then gave a headbutt on the stomach and the man backed off a little. The man grunted and said, "So that is how you want to play. Very well, time to play dirty." He then turned the dial to max. Marowak looked at her son and signaled to leave. He scurried away to hide in one of the tombstones as the other rocket members stopped watching the fight and went after the child Cubone. Marowak tried to block the next move, but she was left exposed in her abdomen. Seeing the opening, he kicked her hard and slammed electrocuted the Pokémon. Marowak felt agonizing pain as the electricity was running through her body. Then she felt a hard kick in the head. She tried to get up, but another kick and shock brought her down. Cubone saw his mother being hurt and cried out, "Cubone." He was trying to run up to her to protect her, but was caught by the other rockets. They held him down as they forced him to watch his mother being tortured by those humans. He was crying for them to stop. However, it was drowned by their cruel laughter. The more he cried, the harsher the laughs as the rockets kept hurting his mother. Ash managed to reach at the 4th floor, with little resistance. He then saw something that left him in shock. Laughter at how the rockets are torturing the Marowak, every hit, some of the blood escaping from the ground Pokémon, while the cries of the Cubone were heard. Nothing was stopping them. His shock changed into rage and he then shouted, "Pikachu, Eevee, take them out." Both Eevee and Pikachu without any hesitation, managed to take out the rocket members. Ash went after the lone rocket member that was abusing Marowak. He never expected the hard blunt of the attack on the side of his face, then a kick in his stomach. Then threw his baton and began to punch the guy in the face, while holding his shirt. While Ash is beating up the rocket, Cubone ran for his mother. He was in tears and began to move her a bit. "Cubone," he whispered, "Cubone." Marowak wasn't breathing as then he cried in anguish, "Cubone." Ash stopped beating up the rocket and went to Cubone. He saw how the young Cubone was crying in anguish for his dead mother. Both Pikachu and Eevee went over to the little Cubone, and began to cuddle him for comfort. He kept crying until he latched onto Eevee while crying in anguish for a loss. The young trainer bent down and picked up the little Pokémon and held him. It was a unique experience seeing a Cubone without the skull helmet. It looked nearly similar of that of the baby Kangaskhan. He rubbed the back of the small Pokémon. "It's okay Cubone," Ash whispered, "I am here for you," soothing the little Pokémon as he cried a little bit. Police officers were already inside of the Lavender Tower, as witnesses pointed out a mysterious vehicle that had some individuals getting inside of the building. They got in and found 2 Team Rockets down and out. The leader signaled to move in. As they finally reached the 4th floor, they found something that they can't comprehend. They saw 4 rockets out, while a dead Marowak near one of the tombstones. Not far from the body was a young trainer, along with 3 Pokémon. They knew they had a long night ahead for them to understand what happened. 1 hour later, Ash was sitting in a bench, in a chapel that is under the tower. There was at least 13 rows of benches while the silence was deafening. Stained glass window of various designs involving the creation of the world he existed, along with the last picture showing both human and Pokémon, holding each other in unity. Both Pikachu and Eevee were asleep with Cubone being in between asleep as well. How can evil exist this badly? How can they have no remorse at all for it? Where is the justice that exists? Why? Ash kept telling himself about it. People have choices, a voice said. He turned around and noticed a man in his 50s, with brown hair that is graying, wearing a black shirt and slacks, along with a small white collar. Choices. The man walked and noticed 3 Pokémon asleep. He then sat next to Ash and then explained in a quiet voice, "We are created with a conscious mind and it is us that determine how we create or destroy the world. Team Rocket's purpose are for greed and power, and it will essential fall again in future time." Again, Team Rocket fell before. He nodded. Years ago it was worse with how things ran, until it was stopped. It was strange how it took an effort of a number of people to do so. Now it is different and people began to lose hope, gym leaders are in despair, and the people began to corrupt their Pokémon. Ash was saddened to hear this. However, things have changed now. You. Ash looked at him with a confused expression. Me. The man nodded. You brought hope, something that was lost for some time. But I couldn't save Cubone's mother, he pointed out. You stepped in and became his surrogate father in some manner. I learned so much of your exploits and am surprised how much you inspire the children. Some would wanted to be like you, to be the best while being selfless and understanding. You took the step of turning things around. Ash looked at the ground for a moment and nodded. Remember, keep strong in your heart and always to the right thing. He then got up and left. The young trainer sat there and pondered about the words. He always did right, and hoped that tragedy could be averted more often. Unknown location. A man was coming toward the masked person. Yes, said the masked person. Boss, holding Mr. Fuji has failed. Should we free our brethren from prison? And waste another failure plan? Let them rot in jail as permanent punishment. We will try something different next time. He bowed and left. The masked person thought, the trainer has turned from a nothing to a bug that has to be taken out. Ash finally left the Lavender Town, with a new Pokémon in tow. He knew he had to leave a Pokémon out of the way and he decided to leave behind Psyduck back to Professor Oak. As he was in the bicycle riding toward Celadon City, he smiled as he saw how Eevee was mothering Cubone. Ever since keeping Cubone, both Pikachu and Eevee went out of the way to take care of the young Pokémon. Pikachu would teach him some few moves at best what he can learn, while Eevee would mother him and cuddle him to show he is loved. Since then, Cubone felt calm and happy. Carrying his mother's bone helmet, made him felt that a part of his mother is always with him. The bike ride managed to cut off a chunk of the time, and he reached toward an underground tunnel. He had to be prepared for any trouble. As he rode carefully, he realized that there was no danger ahead. He just kept moving forward, hoping to reach toward his destination. As he noticed the sun was still up, as he reached out of the tunnel, he saw the sign that he wanted to see, "Welcome to Celadon City." He rode his bike in the path a little more, until he stopped in awed. It was a large city with various shops, casino, and other entertainment buildings. He began to walk, along with his bike and looking at the sights all over the area. He kept looking for a Pokémon Center to rest up and call his family. "We will not give up the gem, Calvin," shouted a man, and yet the voice was so familiar to Ash. "If we do, then we will not reach world domination," shouted also a woman that stopped Ash in his tracks. He turned to where the voices were and froze in disbelief. He thought it was impossible for them to exist. The man stood at least 5 feet 10, with short blue hair, a customized tailored black coat, with black slacks, and boots, carrying a cane and looking menacing. His partner, who is at least 5 feet 10 who had long red hair, wearing a green evening gown with green high heels had a dark smile herself, holding a blue gem in her hands. "Jesse and James," Ash whispered. "You won't get away, Robert and Jane." shouted a teenage boy with a short brown hair and wearing what looked like a Sherlock Holmes. As Ash was grabbed his Pokeball, ready to stop them. Cut! Another man shouted. Ash stopped himself also. He then noticed the director at the top of one of the shorter buildings, and few trailers not far off. The director came down quickly and was excited as anyone was. "That was great of you guys. So perfect, so much timing and finesse," gushed the director. The teenager blushed and replied, "It was nothing, right guys?" James replied, "One of the better shots, if I say so myself, right sweetie?" Jesse nodded in agreement, "Yep, better than the shot we did 6 days ago." "All right, we will take lunch at this point and then continue," the director said and left them. The teenager went to his trailer as James stretched his back as Jessie took out her makeup powder. Ash approached to them and said, excuse me." They both looked at the young trainer, and realized who he was. "Oh my word, you must be Ash Ketchum," said James. "Yeah, how did you know my name?" Jesse answered, "You are all over the television from your fights. I must admit, the way you took down Lieutenant Surge was incredible." Ash blushed a little, "Oh thanks." The actor realized something and said, "Oh where are my manners, my name is Eric. Eric Stewart. And this is my wife, Rachel Stewart née Lillis." They handshook and then Rachel said, "How about some lunch?" He nodded and they went to a cafeteria that is not far off the area. They sat at some seats, waiting until their order is ready. As Ash told his life story from his coma to his fights. Both Rachel and Eric are very interested of his adventure and his encounter of Team Rocket. "I must admit, you recovering at a very fast rate and managing to make it this far, I would have not imagined a regular person to deal with it," Eric pointed out. "Plus facing Team Rocket is no easy fight, considering their somewhat unhanded tactics," Rachel added. Ash nodded as their food is served. They ate as Ash asked more of their career and such. He learned that both of them were childhood friends, but were separated in such manners. Eric lived in a high society of the rich, while Rachel lived in the low class of the area. They both had similar goals and hobbies, that they made a pact for one another. This allowed them to enjoy each other's company. This essential led to Eric leaving the rich life and being an actor, along with Rachel trying to enter it. Over time, they became well known for their duo timing of comedy and tragedy. Essential they married and thus far have a child that is in Sinnoh in a private school, as they film from location to location. Ash smiled at the thought of these two being married. He doubted that in his coma world, that would be possible. And in some manner he did saw one of them in a film involving in an antagonistic roles that made them seem evil, yet comical also. As they finished eating, they were ready to leave, when Ash said, "Hey guys, can you hold up a moment?" They both nodded as Ash took out a piece of paper and began to write something. Once he was done he then gave it to them. They both looked at it, with Eric raising his eyebrow. Eric then said, "Okay. You want us to say these lines?" Ash nodded. They both got into some position and cleared their throats. Rachel then began, "Prepare for trouble. Make it double. To protect the world from devastation. To unite all peoples within our nation. To denounce the evils of truth and love. To extend our reach to the stars above. Jesse. James. Team Rocket, blast off at the speed of light. Surrender now or prepare to fight." As they finished a number of people were clapping, and they both were bowing. Ash shook his head how good it was. "You know Eric, if we were to say that against Ash here, then we will look like a generic villains." "Indeed, love, indeed. Well we must go now. Hope you make it to the Pokémon Leagues." They both waved as Ash waved back and left to the motel he is staying for the night. Unknown location. The masked person sat at a chair, near the desk, twiddling with a pen. The person kept doing it, until someone came in. "Boss, Ash is in Celadon City. This could cause problems." The boss was silent and began to go through scenarios and other thoughts. That is when it spoke, "Keep your eyes on Ash at all cost, and don't interfere, unless otherwise." "Understand." "Yes boss." Dismissed. He left. Then someone else came in the room and a voice said, Is there anything you need for me to do, boss? The boss looked at its servant and replied, stay around here, Ash. You will be needed by my side. Of course, boss. Then the person went over and sat next to the boss. Remember, you are the perfect weapon against any comers that come to you. I am, boss.